My wife secretly divorced me and stole $250, $0 of our savings to buy a house with her affair partner, then filed a fake lawsuit to block me from claiming my inheritance. I feel utterly betrayed and overwhelmed. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get blindsided like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Emily. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5, and I always believed we had a solid foundation. But then one day I found out she'd been cheating on me the entire time, lying, sneaking around, and even secretly planning her escape. And the worst part, it all unraveled in a way I never saw coming, like a perfect storm of betrayal. It started with small things. Emily became more irritable, snapping at me over nothing, avoiding intimacy, and staying out later than usual. I brushed it off at first, thinking she was stressed at work or just tired, but then I noticed her phone buzzing constantly, and she'd hide it like she was hiding a secret. She'd get defensive if I asked to see it, claiming she was just chatting with friends or dealing with work emails. Still, I trusted her, or at least I wanted to. One day I decided to check her phone when she went to the store. I know, bad move, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. I found a string of messages, flirty, suggestive texts exchanged with a guy named Jake. They talked about meeting up, going out, and even about taking it to the next level. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The way she lied about being just friends with him, how she said she was bored and wanted something exciting, I couldn't believe what I was reading. That night I confronted her. I showed her the messages. She looked shocked, then annoyed, and finally she started spinning her usual lies. "You're reading too much into this," she said, rolling her eyes. "Jake's just a friend. We're not doing anything. You're overreacting because you're insecure." She laughed it off like it was no big deal, but I knew better. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she hesitated, the way her voice cracked slightly when she lied. I felt a mixture of anger and heartbreak. How could she just brush this off? This wasn't some innocent flirtation. It was clear she was having an affair. And what hurt even more was how calm she was about it, like she'd been planning this all along. It wasn't just a fling, it was part of a bigger plan. I started digging deeper, trying to find out if she'd done this before. That's when I discovered she'd been secretly talking to Jake for months, even before we got married. She'd been hiding her phone, deleting texts, and sneaking around behind my back. What made everything worse was the financial side. I found out she'd been withdrawing money from our joint account, about $250, $0, over the past year. I had no idea where the money was going, but I suspected she was using it to buy a house with Jake. When I confronted her about the money, she spun more lies, said she was investing in some business opportunity, and that I shouldn't worry, but I knew better. I saw the bank statements, the transfers, the withdrawals. They were all to her, and she'd been planning her escape for months. The shock hit me hard. I felt betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, and morally. How could she do this to me, to us? I thought I knew her, but I was clearly blind. I spent nights lying awake, replaying everything, questioning what I did wrong, whether I could have stopped her. The worst part was realizing she'd been living a double life, and I was the last to find out. It was like my entire world was collapsing, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. At this point, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let her get away with this, not without consequences. But I also felt drained, exhausted from the betrayal and the mounting stress. I wondered how I'd rebuild my life after this, how I'd face friends and family who trusted her, who thought she was perfect. I felt overwhelmed, angry, hurt, and utterly lost. I'd loved her, trusted her, and she'd thrown it all away for a guy I'd never even heard of until I found those texts. The betrayal was so deep, I didn't know if I'd ever recover from it. After I found out about the affair and the stolen money, everything changed in an instant. I mean, one day I was coming home to a wife I thought loved me, and the next I was staring at a reality where she'd been planning to leave me, take our savings, and start a new life with Jake. The anger burned inside me, but beneath that was a deep sense of betrayal, like I'd been hit by a freight train and then kicked while I was down. The first thing I did was dig into the finances. I pulled every statement I could find, scrutinized every withdrawal, every transfer. It was shocking how much she'd taken. $250, gone without a trace. I couldn't believe she'd been so brazen about it. She'd been squirreling away money for months, probably to buy that house with Jake. I found out she'd been talking to him daily, sometimes multiple times a day, all behind my back. She even had a separate email account where they planned everything out. How she'd leave, how she'd hide the money, how she'd pretend everything was fine until she was gone. I also uncovered her secret plan to file a fake lawsuit to block me from claiming my inheritance. I had a sizable estate coming. My grandparents left me a good chunk of money, and she knew about it. I suspect she thought she could manipulate the courts or at least delay my access long enough to get away. I felt sick reading her legal filings, completely fabricated, just a way to screw me over further. Her lawyer was in on it, or at least she'd hired some shady firm that helped her craft this lie. I was furious that she'd go to such lengths, lying, cheating, stealing, just to get her way. The confrontation with her came next. I called her at work just to hear her voice. I told her I knew everything about Jake, the money, the fake lawsuit. Her reaction was infuriating. She started crying, saying she was confused, that she didn't mean for it to get this bad. She claimed she was just bored, that Jake made her feel alive again, and that the money was for our future. She said she loved me, but she just needed something different. That was a lie, of course. I could hear her lying through her teeth. She was trying to gaslight me, make me doubt myself, say I was overreacting or paranoid. But I was. I knew what I saw. I knew what she'd done. My mind was racing. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? I felt like I was drowning in a sea of deception. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her see how deeply she'd hurt me. Instead, I just told her I was done talking until she came clean. I hung up and sat there, staring at the wall, feeling numb. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to everything: her lies, the money, the fake lawsuit. I was devastated but also furious. How dare she think she could get away with this? How dare she treat our marriage like some game she could cheat on and steal from? I started to realize that I'd been a fool for so long, trusting her blindly. She'd been plotting her escape for months, maybe longer. It was like discovering a whole new person, someone I didn't even recognize. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her just walk away with everything. I started researching lawyers, divorce attorneys, even how to fight a fake lawsuit. I wanted to make sure she didn't get away with it. I also began secretly gathering evidence, screenshots of her texts, bank statements, anything that could prove her deception. I knew I had to be careful. She was sneaky, and I didn't want her to find out I was onto her. But I also knew I couldn't let her keep this charade going. I had to fight back. At the same time, I was battling this overwhelming sense of loss. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I felt completely betrayed, like my entire world was crumbling. It was hard to accept that the woman I'd married, the woman I thought I knew, was capable of such lies and betrayal. I felt like I was spiraling into despair, but also knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her win. I had to fight for what was mine, my inheritance, my dignity, my life. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of a long, complicated battle. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I couldn't let her keep pulling the wool over my eyes. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got, especially when I realized how calculated everything was. She'd been planning her escape for months, squirreling away money, building her lie about the lawsuit, all while pretending everything was fine. It was like she had a double life, and I was just a pawn in her game. I decided I needed legal help. I reached out to a lawyer specializing in divorce and financial fraud. I didn't want her to get away with what she'd done, especially not the theft of our savings or the fake lawsuit. I explained everything: her affair, the missing money, her illegal legal filings, and he listened carefully. He told me I had a strong case, but it wouldn't be easy. She was smart, manipulative, and she had plenty of resources to fight me. Still, I was determined. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. Meanwhile, I started secretly recording her calls and saving her emails. I knew she'd be lying, trying to spin her side of the story, but I wanted concrete proof. I also hired a private investigator to follow her around, just to confirm her meetings with Jake and her movements. I wasn't about to be blindsided again. Every day I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of clarity, like I was finally seeing her for who she really was. Not the wife I loved, but a manipulative, selfish woman who'd betrayed everything. One evening she came home early, more irritable than usual. She tried to act normal, but I could tell she was nervous. I played it cool, but inside I was boiling. I confronted her face to face, asking her directly about the money, Jake, and the lawsuit. Her reaction was classic: denial, gaslighting, outright lies. She told me I was paranoid, that I was making things up, that she loved me and was only trying to fix our marriage. She even threw in the "you don't trust me" line, which made me want to vomit. I knew her game now. She was trying to manipulate me into backing off, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. That night, I stayed up researching everything I could about legal procedures. I learned how to challenge her fake lawsuit, how to freeze our joint accounts, and how to uncover any hidden assets she might have. I also started drafting my own legal documents, preparing for a fight. I knew she'd try to drag this out to wear me down, but I was ready. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain in exposing her lies. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry at myself for trusting her so blindly. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see her true colors sooner. But I also knew I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I had to be smarter, tougher. I started reaching out to friends and family I trusted, telling them bits of the truth. I needed support, even if I was ashamed to admit how badly I'd been played. The most shocking moment came when I found out she'd already hired her own lawyer, probably trying to prepare for a divorce or some kind of legal battle. I felt like I'd been punched again. She was serious about throwing everything away, about fighting me tooth and nail. I realized I had to be even more strategic. I couldn't just confront her and hope for the best. I had to outthink her, outmaneuver her, and make sure I protected what was mine. So I kept gathering evidence, kept pushing forward with my legal plan. I knew she was dangerous, but I also knew I couldn't let her destroy my life any further. I had to fight for my inheritance, for my dignity, for the truth. I was starting to see that this was much bigger than just a marriage gone wrong. It was a battle for my future, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The more I dug into her plans, the clearer it became how calculated everything was. She had been playing me for months, maybe longer. Every time I thought I had her figured out, she'd switch tactics, lie her way out, or throw some new curveball. Her whole attitude was a mix of bitchy defiance and fake innocence, like she was trying to convince herself she was innocent even while she was plotting her escape. That made me furious because I saw right through her act now. She was a master manipulator, and I was just a fool who trusted her. One night, I found out she'd been secretly meeting with her lawyer, probably to finalize the fake lawsuit and plan her next move. I caught wind of it through my private investigator. I felt like I'd been sucker punched all over again. She'd been lying to my face, telling me she was just stressed, working late, or trying to fix the marriage. Meanwhile, she was orchestrating her entire escape route. I'd been blind, but now I saw how deeply she'd gone into this deception. I realized I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer again, handed over all the evidence I'd collected, and asked what my options were. We discussed freezing the joint accounts, filing for an injunction to stop her from selling or transferring assets, and challenging her fake lawsuit. The legal process was complicated, but I was determined to stop her before she could do any more damage. I also filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent her from hiding or moving any more money. That was a huge step. Finally, I was fighting back. At the same time, I started to confront the betrayal emotionally. I was devastated, of course, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been so focused on her lies that I hadn't looked at my own life. I'd been working so hard to keep everything together to make her happy that I'd missed the signs she was slipping away. Now I saw how she'd used me, how she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from us all for her own selfish reasons. It hurt like hell, but it also motivated me to get justice. Her reaction to my legal moves was predictable. She started playing the victim. She said I was destroying her, that I was accusing her of things she didn't do, and that I was ruining our marriage. It was so transparent. She was trying to manipulate the courts, the friends, even the family to turn everything around on me. But I refused to be swayed. I had proof and I knew her game. I also knew I couldn't let her keep lying, stealing, and scheming. Meanwhile, I was feeling more isolated than ever. My friends told me to just walk away, to let her go and start over. But I couldn't do that, not after everything. I felt betrayed, angry, and humiliated, but I also knew I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her walk away with all our savings, with my inheritance, and with my reputation. I started preparing for the worst, thinking about how to protect myself financially, emotionally, and legally. I didn't want her to get away with this, and I wasn't going to. Every day brought new surprises. She'd send me angry texts, accuse me of ruining her life, and try to manipulate the situation. But I stayed focused. I knew her tactics: gaslighting, guilt-tripping, lying, and I refused to fall for them. I kept gathering evidence, talking to my lawyer, and planning my next moves. I was determined to expose her lies, stop her from taking everything, and reclaim what was rightfully mine. It was brutal. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I was fighting to save what was left of my life. I learned a lot in those days about deception, about resilience, and about how far some people will go for selfish gain. I also learned that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to fight for yourself. And I was ready to do just that, no matter how painful it was. The betrayal ran deep, but I refused to let her win. The legal battle was now in full swing, and I could feel the pressure mounting. She was fighting me every step of the way, hearing her own lawyer, filing motions, and trying to delay everything possible. It was clear she was desperate to keep her secrets hidden and her plans intact. I knew I had to stay one step ahead if I wanted to stop her from walking away with everything, including my inheritance and the stolen savings. One day, I received a court notice that she had filed a motion to dismiss my claims, claiming I was harassing her and that I had no right to interfere with her personal affairs. I was furious. She was trying to turn the tables, painting herself as the victim again, but I had all the evidence: the bank statements, the texts, her lawyer's emails. I handed everything over to my attorney, who prepared a strong response, challenging her claims and pushing for a court order to freeze her assets. Meanwhile, I learned she'd already bought a house with Jake, an expensive place in the suburbs. I found out through a friend who saw her moving boxes into a new place. That was the final straw. She'd been lying about her investment and her intentions all along. She'd been planning her escape even before I uncovered the affair. That's when I realized she'd been using me, our money, and our marriage as a way to secure her future with Jake. What made it worse was her attempt to block me from claiming my inheritance. She filed a fake lawsuit, claiming I was unsuitable to inherit anything because of supposed financial irresponsibility. It was a complete fabrication, but she believed she could manipulate the courts into giving her an advantage. I was furious when I saw her filings, knowing she was willing to lie and cheat her way to get what she wanted. I hired a forensic accountant to trace every penny of the stolen $250, $0, proving she'd been diverting funds for months. I also started working on a plan to expose her in court, presenting the evidence of her affair, the secret purchases, and her attempts to hide assets. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that she'd been planning her exit for a long time. I felt betrayed on every level: financially, emotionally, and morally. But I also felt a newfound sense of purpose. I was determined not to let her ruin me. One afternoon, she showed up at my house unexpectedly, trying to guilt-trip me into working things out, claiming she was sorry and confused. She cried, begged, and said she'd do anything to make it right. But I wasn't fooled. I saw through her tears and her lies. I told her I had enough evidence to prove her deception, that I wasn't going to let her get away with destroying everything we had built. I told her I was going to fight her in court, and that she'd have to face the consequences of her actions. That was the turning point. I realized I had to stay strong, not just for myself but for what little integrity I had left. I knew this fight wasn't over, but I also knew I was no longer going to be a victim. I was going to stand my ground, fight for my inheritance, and expose her for the manipulative, selfish woman she'd become. It hurt to admit how badly I'd been betrayed, but I also understood that the only way to get closure was to confront her head-on. Every day I felt the weight of the betrayal crushing down, but I also felt a sense of resolve. I'd been blindsided, yes, but I wasn't going to let her take everything without a fight. I was determined to prove her lies, protect what was mine, and finally put an end to this nightmare. This was about more than money or the house. It was about dignity, justice, and reclaiming my life from someone I once loved but who turned out to be nothing more than a manipulative, self-serving liar. The court hearings dragged on for months, and every day felt like walking through a minefield. Emily, or should I say she, doubled down on her lies, trying to discredit me and paint herself as the victim. She hired a slick lawyer who knew all the dirty tricks, filing endless motions, trying to delay the proceedings and spinning stories about how I was unstable and jealous. I stayed calm, though. I had the evidence and I knew she was running out of options. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge called for a final hearing. I sat there, feeling exhausted but resolute. I presented everything: bank statements showing the $250, $0 she'd stolen, her secret texts with Jake, the fake lawsuit she filed to block, my inheritance, and her attempts to hide assets. My lawyer laid out the case clearly, showing how manipulative and deceitful she'd been from the start. Her lawyer tried to argue that I was harassing her and that she was the victim of false accusations, but the judge wasn't buying it. The court ordered her to return the stolen funds, which she had tried to hide in offshore accounts, and to cease her efforts to block my inheritance. The fake lawsuit was dismissed, and she was ordered to pay court costs and damages for her fraudulent filings. Watching her squirm under the courtroom lights, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had fought hard to expose her, to reclaim what was mine, and to hold her accountable. She looked defeated, her bitchy smirk gone, replaced by a look of pure rage and frustration. I knew she'd be angry, probably trying to come after me in other ways, but I also knew I had done everything I could to stop her. In the aftermath, I filed for divorce. It was a bitter process, filled with legal battles and emotional fallout, but I knew it was the only way to finally move on. I also started rebuilding my life, seeking therapy to deal with the betrayal and focusing on my own healing. The trust I once had in her was shattered, but I learned a hard lesson: never ignore the signs, never give someone the benefit of the doubt when they're clearly hiding something. Looking back, I realize how much I grew through this ordeal. I learned the importance of standing up for myself, of not letting someone manipulate and steal from me. I learned that sometimes love isn't enough to save a marriage, especially when one person is determined to destroy everything for their own gain. And I learned that justice, even if delayed, is worth fighting for. If there's one thing I want others to take from my story, it's this: trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't ignore it. Protect yourself, your assets, and your dignity. Because betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the only way to truly move forward is to fight back, no matter how painful it gets. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it cost me everything I thought I knew about love. In the end, I found my strength, and that's what truly matters.